Let's find the domain of these equations. The first equation is function f of x equals the cube root of 5x minus 3. Part B is h of x equals the fourth root of 3x minus 2. And part C is g of x equals the tall square root of x minus 5 over x. Now, I don't have enough room to do part C. I'm going to do that on the next video. So let's do part A and B. Part A, f of x equals the cube root, the third root of 5x minus 3. Now I want you to notice that this function has an odd index in the radical. See in the little hook there's a 3, that's an odd number. That means there's no restriction on the domain. There's no restriction on the radicand. The radicand is the stuff under the radical sign, 5x minus 3. We have no restriction on that. It can be any value. It can be positive, it can be negative, it doesn't matter. So that means that we have no restriction on what value of x that we plug into it. And that tells us that the domain of this function f is all real numbers, everything open from negative infinity to positive infinity. Now let's look at part B. H of x is the fourth root of 3x minus 2. This guy has an even index in the little hook. It's index 4. Now, since it's even, it has some rules about the radicand. There's a restriction. The radicand can never be negative. It can never be negative. It can be 0. That's not a problem. It can equal 0. It can be positive number. It can be 0, but it cannot be negative. So let's take the radicand, 3x minus 2, and set it greater than or equal to 0. Okay, now all we have to do is solve for x to figure out what the domain is. So we get 3x is greater than or equal to positive 2, x is greater than or equal to 2/3. Now what does this mean? These are all the x values that make the radicand, 3x minus 2, greater or equal to 0. In other words, non-negative. So we're going to keep just these x values and nothing more. All the x's greater than or equal to 2/3. So let's write that. Domain H, we'll write it in interval notation. It's going to include 2/3 because there's an equal sign in the inequality. So boxy bracket on the 2/3, comma, all the way out to infinity. Open bracket. Now let's go to the next video to see part C.